Hi, I'm Jenny, and I live with trauma and trauma reactions, trauma symptoms. They look like depression, anxiety. Some would say it's PTSD. I'm also a trauma therapist. I feel like I found this path to at first kind of get to know better what's going on with me. I started out as an art therapist and a counselor, and then got into what's called somatic experiencing trauma therapy, and it talks a lot about how trauma is in fact carried in the body. Somatic experiencing trauma therapy has helped me better understand how these symptoms arrive. They look like anxiety, depression. You can feel them in your body. And the tools that I have learned to do for myself and now for clients has helped soothe those symptoms so we can talk about the memory that might be attached to them, or just soothe the symptoms and be able to live a happier life. Oftentimes people who have experienced trauma will look around and be like, why am I different now? Usually it's pretty instant, like something awful happened, whatever it is, and you notice like you feel an instant disconnect with others. Others that are so easily happy or find joy or have a balance, and you're like, why can't I get there? Why am I so chaotic? Why am I so anxious all of a sudden? We tend to try to power through it to survive, especially in childhood. If you're in a traumatic environment or something traumatic happens to you, you just want to get past it and get through it, and you do what it takes. That is a survival instinct that is very much in our design to do to get through it. But then it's kind of when you are safe that a lot of these symptoms bubble up, and then you're like, what's wrong with me? And when I noticed in my own story, when it was very, very active, was actually after I had kids. When they reached the age of when I first experienced some trauma is when a lot of things started to stir up for me, and I would actually disassociate. So there'd be moments where I would lose hours. Like I would be in the kitchen and then all of a sudden I'm changing a diaper. So like the kids were safe, but I was very, very scared of like what was going on with me. And I had an amazing therapist that utilized art therapy because that's kind of the language I spoke at the time. And she helped me with the art therapy and with my partner and talk therapy, like a big combination, just kind of feel better about having this happen, not feel crazy or alone or bad or like a bad mother. And it's just like, this is normal. This is what happens. This is probably the connection. And just that alone, just like naming it to tame it, was beautiful. So when I'm feeling low or feeling anything like this is the beginning of like some sort of spiral up or down, I have the skills now through somatic therapy to catch it. Like I notice it in the body first. And that's the key for me. And what I try to teach my clients too is just like, there's this small window of like opportunity to kind of intervene pretty strong if you are very, very body aware of how your symptoms arrive in your body. So I'll notice it in my belly and I'll be like, something's going on, and it could go really up or really down. And then sometimes I'm able to make a connection to like what started it. And address that, kind of name it to tame it. But oftentimes my best go-to is to meditate, to like drop everything and give myself permission for self-care, which is so hard for women, and to just meditate or go for a long walk or just lay on the couch and just breathe. If I'm not if it's starting to already become like formulated thoughts of anxiety or depression, maybe it's a little bit too much to force a meditation. So I'll just like lay down and breathe and just focus on that, which is a form of meditation. But that's my go-to. And it really is just a matter of slowing it down, catching it, acknowledging it, maybe connecting it to something that happened to trigger it. And just giving myself full permission to, for the rest of the day, just continue to try to keep it where it needs to be so it doesn't overtake everything. And then also to orient to like what is going well, what is safe, what is comforting. Hug a dog, hug a kid. One time when it was starting to get really bad, this was a couple years ago, I took my kids and we played hooky for a whole day and went to the lake, and it was like the best therapy. What's wrong with the way the world views these symptoms is It's not a trauma-sensitive world. Oftentimes when people have symptoms or are active in their symptoms, whatever their diagnosis or issues are, their loved ones feel like they have to tiptoe around or they don't know what to do. And they often do say the wrong thing, and it's not their fault. There's not enough education out there of how to deal with this. If you have it in you to advocate for your needs pretty early on before, the symptoms get too activated, that's the best thing to do, especially if there's like a pre-designed kind of contract with your partner or loved ones, like, hey, I might, like, now that we're talking about this more in the open, if I'm feeling like I'm starting to get depressed, I'm gonna voice that, and here's like the game plan. So there's a lot of like comfort and de-escalation just in the planning part, just knowing that there is a plan, so then your symptoms are contained. And so if you start to feel it coming on, I encourage people who are experiencing them, like, as soon as you can and as soon as you notice them, to verbalize that to whoever's around that you trust and is aware of what's going on with you. If you don't have that level of comfort, then it's okay to just excuse yourself from situations. It's okay to say, you know what, like, I don't want to go for coffee today, I have other things to do. It's okay to say whatever you need to do, to just do what you need to do to calm your symptoms down. And then for those that are living with loved ones, sometimes there's a tendency to want to fix that you gotta really be conscious of, because that's not what they need all the time. The most helpful thing you can do for somebody struggling is to be curious about what it's like for them, rather than try to problem solve for them, rather than try to like throw them some self-help books. Like, they need to be heard. There are some things you could say to really better support somebody who's struggling, and it would be, like, how is that for you? You don't want to jump to like, let's fix this, because it might be unfixable in the mind of the person suffering from it. But let's just sit here, and what do you need? I'll sit here and be quiet with you. I'm not going to try to problem solve for you, or I'll just be an ear. Just tell me what it's like for you right now. I think that's the biggest issue with trauma in general and symptoms of any sort of diagnosis, is we need to slow it down and validate that it's painful. It needs to be seen, it needs to be heard, it needs to be understood in a way where people don't take things personally if somebody's having a bad day. If you have the tools, if you don't have to struggle with something like this, you have the capability to not make it about you and just hold a little bit of space for that person.